The story you tell yourself determines your level of success or not success. The stories we tell ourselves, our origin stories, are the stories that support us and keep moving us forward, or they keep us stuck in place. And I know I talk about the stories over and over because it's so important. Your level of confidence depends on the story you tell. If you constantly tell the same story of I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy, I'll never get that promotion, I'm not as pretty as everybody else, I'm not as thin as everybody else, then that's what you're going to get, because that's what you're putting out to the universe. You have to rewrite or rewire your story to support you. So if you were raised with, parents that constantly looked at you to fulfill them, as in to acknowledge them and tell them how amazing they are, you became a people pleaser. Well, as you get older, people flock to you as a people pleaser, not because they want to help you, they want you to tell them how amazing they are. And it ends up tearing you down, because you realize you're walking around there by saying, can I please you? Can I please you? Can I help you? Can I help you? The same as if you're with highly critical, parent. If your mother or father are highly critical, you wear that critical mask, and when somebody criticizes you, you collapse, because you want so badly for their approval. Because in your mind, when your parents criticized you, you weren't getting the approval that you needed at that age. So you have to retell the story. You have to retell the story of how much your parents approved of you, and how you'd come home from school with good grades and they would applaud you. And if you came home from school with bad grades, they applauded you. It's the same with if you wore the mask of a victim. Say, you were constantly victimized, and it doesn't have to be a sexual trauma. It could be, you had a bully in the neighborhood, and every time you saw him or her, he constantly victimized you, and you learned how to play small when you were around somebody that kind of was a bully. So you wear that victim mask. You've got to learn how to retell the story. You've got to learn how to retell the story that, say there was a bully, and she was always pushing you around and being mean to you. You reframe it in your mind as, you guys, this happened, but you yelled at her and said that's not nice, and you developed this amazing friendship. Now, a lot of you are shaking your head like, seriously, Karen, it is that easy and yet that hard, because you have to spend the time rewriting the story, rewiring it. You have to constantly repeat it over and over and over. And if it's a story you don't really want to repeat, then it makes it challenging. That's why you have to rewrite it as a much more positive story. Because if you keep this positive story in your mind, your confidence stays up here. But every time you think back to that, that time you made a mistake in math class and you got the numbers wrong, and everybody in the class laughed at you, so when people talk math, you're like, oh, I'm not good at math. You got one number wrong. That doesn't define you, but because of the age you were, it does define you. So you just redefine who you are. And that's why you rewire your story, you rewrite your story. And you see it all over the internet because it's so crucial. Everything in your life begins and ends with that story that you tell yourself. And if you really want to soar and take off, you've got to have a story that supports you as a person who soars and takes off. My story is constantly evolving, because the story I told as a child, to me, that was abused, and the story I tell now are radically different. I mean, I carry my story that I tell myself now around with me all the time because it empowers me. If I'm going into a situation where I kind of get little butterflies in my belly, or I kind of get a little nervous, or, I read my story and say, oh yeah, that's who I am. That's the woman I am. And it lifts me up. So just sit down and rewrite a different story. If you want to apply for a job selling computers, selling Apple computers, but you really don't have a ton of sales experience, but you can do it because you've been selling yourself and selling things forever, write that down as your story. Write down your story that you're the #1 saleswoman for the Apple, and last year you made, $500,000 selling Apple computers, and you got all these award recognitions, and you read it over and over and over. It gets implanted into your head, and you believe it. And each time you hit a milestone, you do another one, and you keep lifting yourself up. This is how successful people are so successful. They know how to do this. They know if they did something and it gets locked in their head and they get put on the hamster wheel, they know how to get off of it. That's why so many people, if you go to YouTube and you listen to the really successful people, they'll all tell you, if I only knew then what I knew now, I mean, if I only knew 20 years ago what I know now, I would have built this association 20 times larger. But I didn't have the skill set. I didn't have the story. You know, my story was I got the job because I was the only person around the table that wasn't a millionaire, and that I was willing to take $40,000 a year. And from the minute I took this job, really up until today, people constantly tell me, you know, you have no business in a job, you don't know what you're doing, you've never lobbied. I mean, all these skill sets that I had to build and stack upon each other. So if I would have learned back then how to tell the story of, you know what, I got the job because I was the one in the room that raised their hand and said, I can do this, I can grow this association. And if I don't know how to lobby, I'll figure it out, or I'll hire a lobbyist. If I don't know how to, you know, do budgeting, I'll figure it out. But instead, I let people pile on top of this flawed story I was already telling myself of, I was the only, to me, I was the least successful person in the room, so let's give it to her. And I had to retell that story. Now when I think about, you know, when I go back and think about it, I smile, because I understand I was the most qualified person in the room to do this job. Yes, they were all millionaires, and yes, you know, one was a gazillionaire, but they all had different skill sets. They didn't have the skill set of relationship building and, you know, growing things and, you know, having the faith to just keep putting one foot in front of the others. They already had done that. They wanted to do new mountains. They wanted to build new places. So don't allow other people to define your story. If other people told you when you were young, you know, my parents used to tell me all the time, your sister's really smart, your brother's really athletic, and well, you're you, ha ha ha. And I internalized that to, well, I can't be, if I'm not athletic and I'm not smart, what's that leave me with? Nothing. So I had to work really, really, really hard to get to where I was until I realized I'm gonna tell myself a different story. So sit down and think, what story are you always telling yourself? When you get nervous, when you get put into a situation where you're kind of uneasy or off balance, or you've got to do something new, break out of the mold, what's your go-to story? Because that's the story you're allowing to define yourself. It is time for you to define you as how you want to be. How do you want to show up in the world? What do you want? You know, this time next year, what do you want? Who do you want to be? Because if you decide who you want to be, if you decide today you want to be a millionaire in 2 years, and you do the work and put the effort in, you'll be a millionaire in 2 years. Because it's mindset, baby, it's mindset. Change your mindset, change your story, constantly evolve, 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 and you'll get what you want. Or you can just sit and think, oh my gosh, I wonder why everybody else has what I have things I want, but I don't, because they rewrote their story. If you need help rewriting a story, please DM me, reach out to me. I believe so much in rewriting a story that I might actually do a workshop, a free workshop. And if you want a free workshop, put it down in the comments before, just say below, just say free, on how to do it, because it's so crucial to your success. And if you Google rewire your story, redesign your story, retell your story, you're going to see a million videos pop up, because it's such a key piece to your confidence. How you tell your story is the key. If you need help, let me know. I want you to, you know, I want you to have next level confidence, and I want you to find your blue rose. And it all starts with the story you tell yourself. Have a great day. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you want a free workshop, want me to do a free workshop, put it in the comments below. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.